Report to the cloud. Okay. So we're going to look at behaviors, defining behavior and behavioral change. That we're going to finish this up today. On Thursday, I'll do a kind of a review, a summary of what we've done for this module. On Friday, the Module 3 test will be available. It'll be available for a week. And so you'll be able to start on Friday. It'll end the next Saturday at 11:59 p.m., kind of how I do everything. All right, so let's get to defining behavior and behavioral change today. So when we start looking at behavior, for us to be able to truly analyze a behavior, we have to operationally define it. And this is where a lot of times you need to think about behavior. When we're dealing with behavior, it's almost like doing a research project. Because when you're just creating a research project, you have something you want to study. You have to operationally define what you are going to study. You can't just say you're going to study reading. You need to think about what you're going to study and then operationally define it for the activity that is going on in your study specifically. So when we do behaviors, it's the very same thing. We need to make sure that the behavior that we're observing must be observable, it must be written in measurable terms, and must be stated in positive terms. So those are the three elements of a good operational definition. Okay? Observable, measurable, and stated in positive terms. So let's look at some vague descriptions of behavior, and then let's see some operationally described behaviors. So this first one is Chad is lazy. Can it be observed? It depends, right? It depends on your definition of what lazy is. And lazy, is lazy a positive term or is it derogatory? It's derogatory. Kind of putting the kid down and saying, you're just being lazy, Chad. But so that's kind of sets him up to be a problem, more of a problem, correct? When you start thinking those terms. So we need to be thinking in terms that are not emotionally laden and looking down at kids. If we look at this, lazy means not doing work, right? That's a general definition of it. But if we say that on average, Chad completes one assignment out of 5, it's saying a similar thing, is it not? It's saying that he's not doing his work. But also, if you notice, he does complete one assignment out of 5, but we know that he's not doing his work, not getting it turned in, and we can measure it, correct? We can observe it, how many things were turned in. It can be measured, and then we can see it over time because the behavior will be possibly repeated. And it's stated in positive terms. Is that correct? He completes. He doesn't turn in 4 out of 5 assignments, right? So we're saying he completes 1 out of 5 assignments. So that's a different view. So now then we have Susan is mean. And mean is another term that is very emotionally laden. And you've seen these slides before. I'm not being very creative with slides. But mean, mean has a different meaning for everybody. What does it mean, But if we state it in operational terms, Susan makes derogatory comments to Peter such as, "You're stupid. Can you count this? Can you measure this?" Yes. How many times she says it, you do a little check on. But this is kind of hard. Also, is it stated in positive terms? Susan makes derogatory comments, right? And so it's observable, it's measurable, and it's stated in positive terms. Let's look at another one. Thomas doesn't care about school. Okay, we don't know if that's a true statement or not, because again, it's putting some kind of rationale on him. We don't know if he doesn't care. What happens if his mom doesn't get up to take him to school on time? So we put this: Thomas is absent on average 2 days a week. Is that measurable? Is Thomas doesn't care about school observable or measurable? Not really. Thomas doesn't care about school. You don't know. It's kind of like trying to nail Jello to the wall. That's a new term I learned. I like that one. Think about it, Joe. I used to say it's like trying to grasp mercury. And when I was in middle school, they would put mercury on our science table and say, "See if you can pick it up," and it slides around. It's a liquid metal, and it's a heavy metal. And they were giving us that to play with in school. So that explains my problem. There you go. All right. So it's kind of like trying to nail Jello to the wall. But this is much clearer. We've got a good definition going there. All right. Another one. Manuel doesn't play nicely. Well, again, that's vague. But here the operational description is Manuel grabs toys out of Peter's hands. And it's observable, measurable, and it's stated in positive terms. Okay. So let's practice this. I want you guys to kind of find your socially distancing table mates, and I want you to see if you can come up with a operational definition of behavior for Raul. You need to use observable terms, use measurable terms, be clear and concise and complete, and state it in positive ways. Okay, so let's work with our kind of group up. It doesn't have to be two to a group. It could be 3 or 4. I just want you guys to work together to see if you can come up with a good definition. And let's see. You guys online be thinking about this. This is we're just gonna do this as a big group activity. So you guys can be kind of writing your own online and think about it. Okay, I give you just a few more minutes, another minute or so. Um, So what is the office daily, office discipline referrals, ODRs? What does the teacher write on the office discipline referral to send him to the office for his behavior? That Raul is what? Raul is disrespectful. Is that what she writes on the ODR? Okay, so let's ask the questions. Is that a clear, concise, operational definition of the behavior that Raul is engaged in? No. So Raul is disrespectful, is vague. So this is not what we want. So what are we going to say? We can begin when given a task or an assignment, whatever it is, you know, whatever you want to put this. What does Raul do? Say it again. He disrupts the class, but let's be more specific. Yes, he is disrupting the class, but how is he? Is he disrupting the class by turning over tables? Is he disrupting the class by dancing around and telling jokes? How is he disrupting the class?
It's like blurting out without being called on it or just interrupting.
Okay, so when given a task, Raul yells out comments such as, i.e., I'm not doing that. That disrupts okay, would that be an appropriate descriptor? Can you measure that? You would do count out how many times he yells out some kind of comment when given a task. So you would do a hash mark or ticks or it would be a frequency count is what you would do of this behavior. So is this much clearer than Raul disrupts a class? You see? So this is, and is it disrespectful? Yeah, we would say it's disrespectful, but disrespectful is a vague term that has many meanings. So this is Raul yells out comments such as, I'm not doing that, that disrupts the class. And that would be much more appropriate in the office discipline referrals. Okay, so let's practice another one. Here is Mr. Robertson is a member of the student support team at Delroy Elementary School. He and his colleagues have reviewed a pre-referral intervention form for Grayson. However, they are not quite sure why his teachers, Mrs. Nichols, has referred him. Mrs. Nichols stated on the referral form that Grayson's problem behavior is that he reads below grade level. So let's look. This is the, now do you see that this is not just behaviors, that we're going to look at academic behaviors too. Because behavior is anything that you can see, you can count, and you can, anything somebody does. Not thoughts, but what they do. And so reading is a behavior. So we've got reading below grade level. What's wrong with that definition? What's wrong with that definition? First, it's stated in a negative sense, right? It's reading below. That is a negative term. That's one. What else? Is it, can we measure that? Sorta. But, yeah.
It could be more specific, like, maybe say what grade level he is at, or maybe a specific score on something.
There you go. You need to know, what does this mean? What does grade level mean? You know, so we don't know that. So then so let's take this, and so his teacher is asked, we need clarification, and she says, Grayson is reading at first grade level and needs to read a grade level text fluently. And he is, does it tell what grade he's in? It doesn't. Let's say he's in third grade, okay? So let's come up with I want you guys to talk again to your socially distanced classmates and come up with a operational definition for this. So you can clarify these behaviors, okay? Let's do 2 minutes. Seconds, and then I think they will share. Okay, so here's another addition to this, is that if you notice in the little scenario, the teacher says that what she wants him to do is to read better 100% of the time. Okay, what's wrong with that? That's a good thing, is it not? Read better? But is it clear? There's no goal. You can't measure it. What does read better mean? So this target behavior is off. So we'll we said he was third grade, right? We'll get that third grade. That's his thing. All right. So why did you guys come up with a operational definition of his behavior of Grace's behavior?
I said like, we said Grayson reads 30 words a minute, and we were just saying that's what first grade was. We said Grayson reads 30 words per minute.
Okay, so on the foot, so 30 words per minute, which is a first grade skill. Right. And you can kind of say Grayson, a third grade student, reads on average 30 words correct per minute. So that could be a thing, and then your target behavior is to get him to increase his reading. So your goal would be, let's say third grade, I think it's like 100 words correct per minute. I can't remember what the thing is. So you said target behavior to read 100 words correct per minute with 2 errors. Let's see. By the end of 3-6 weeks. Let's just say something like that. That would be it. That'd be, it's measurable. You've got your outcome. That would be the target behavior. And so Grayson, a third grade student, reads 30 words correct per minute. So anybody else want to share what you did? You could, there could be a comprehension thing. It could be Grayson, a third grade student, reads first grade, is able to read a first grade reading selection and answer 3 out of 5 comprehension questions correct. Would that be observable and measurable? And it would be stated in positive terms. And then your goal would be to be able to read a third grade reading selection and answer 4 out of 5 reading comprehension questions correctly at 100% of the time. That would be a good target. So see, that's how you would do that when it comes to, see how behavior and academics are quite aligned because they're all behavior, correct? So that's an important element for us to be thinking about. Good work, guys. All right, so so when we do this, we want to look at what the behavior is. We need to define the behavior clearly, and that we're going to call the target behavior. All right? That's the behavior that we're targeting to change. So and this is something you guys, you don't have to defer to a psychologist or a behavior specialist. You guys are behavior specialists in your classroom. And so you need to be able to do this quickly and look at a replacement behavior and give them to, that's just good classroom management, okay? All right, so you have the target behavior is for Lisa. Lisa gets out of her seat too often, okay? That's the target behavior. We want the replacement behavior to be Lisa will remain in her seat during instruction because what she's doing, she's probably disrupting the class. So during instruction, Lisa will remain in her seat. Here's the target behavior. Joey's a little frustrated at times. Joey breaks pencils when frustrated. I'd like you to be more specific. Does he snap them in half? Does he crack the tip off? What does he do? But we're going to, the replacement behavior for this, when Joey will request a break when he feels frustrated. We want to teach him to be responsible for his behaviors rather than get all frustrated. Here's another one. Sean talks out in class without raising his hand. Without might be, Sean talks out in class before the teacher calls on him. And then here, Sean will raise his hand before speaking in class. But you've got to be more specific because what happens? The teacher is talking, he raises his hand and blurts it out. Is that what you want? You want Sean will raise his hand and wait patiently for the teacher to call on him before he speaks in class. See? So we want to be more specific. So it's important. So replacement behaviors are the behaviors we want to see the child engaged in, not the target behaviors. These are the ones we want to target for change. Okay? Then we need to collect data. And why do you need to collect data? Why is it important to collect data? Let's use Grayson here. Let's chart this. Let's just say that we don't have any data on Grayson, and we're going to try to chart it. So we have this graph over here, and we're going to start at 40 words correct per minute and go to 100. And we don't have any information on Grayson, so how are we going to say where he's at? Do we know? We don't know. So why is it important to have baseline data? You know where you started, right? So we say he's reading 40 words correct per minute. Within 6 instructional weeks or 3, whatever it is, we want him to be reading 100 words correct per minute. That's the aim line. How do we know that he's getting it? If we don't collect any data, do we know that? Okay, you guys are going on a trip cross country. How do you know that you're on the right track? Siri's telling you? Yeah, but Siri doesn't always get it. Have you ever gotten on Siri giving you a direction, you go way off the reservation or somewhere else and go, holy no, how did I end up out here? And then you find out that the place you're going is just right around the corner. You know, I've done that. I went down all these dirt roads, came back, and it was just the next exit. So that's kind of it. But you need data to know. So if we can see, so let's say here's 6 weeks, and this is the data we have. The first 6 weeks is here, next 6 weeks is here, next 6 weeks is here, next 6 weeks is here, and we graph this out. What can we see? Is he getting there? No. So we probably need to do something different. right here. And then we maybe see this. And then we say, there you go, he's working on it. So, I mean, that's the thing, that's why we need to have data. And it needs to be able to be data that is apples to apples, not just apples to oranges. So baseline, you have to collect your data. And then you do the intervention, whatever the intervention is. And then you collect the data post-intervention to see if you made progress. Types of data that we have are frequency. That's how often something occurs. Now, it's interesting is that, let's say, you think tapping your pencil, or tapping your finger, would that be a good frequency count? Are you going to be able to count how many times I tapped my finger or the person? No. So frequency is for lower occurrences of behaviors like hitting somebody. If somebody hits somebody, that would be good. Or out of seat behavior might be good. But I've had kids that were out of their seat one time all day long. So, that's more duration. So frequency is the number of items that happen, counting at lower occurrences of items. The duration is for things that are either really fast or really low. So you might want duration like the out of seat behavior one time, but he's out of the seat for the whole day. Or tapping the pencil, they tap their pencil for 5 minutes. At a very fast rate, very slow rate, something like that. So duration is how long that behavior has occurred. Latency is an interesting one. This is all what teachers want to have is a short latency period. And you have to have your good teacher wait time. Good teacher wait time is like 30 seconds, not 2 seconds. So latency is after the time you've given the instruction that the child gets going, doing their work. So after instruction, and then when the child begins doing the work or gives an answer. That's latency, that period between there. It's a processing time. And kids with real long latency periods, they probably have more of a processing disorder than kids that have real short latency periods. And we see the difference. Gifted and talented kids usually, as soon as you give them the instructions, they're off doing the stuff because they're processed it real fast. Kids with learning disabilities sit there for a while and say, what you thinking? You need to help them through that. Then intensity is how hard. Like, for example, if a student hits another student one time, but it was hard enough to leave a bruise, is that important to know? Yeah. So that's intensity. I had a screamer one time that I was working with. But the thing was that she didn't scream really loud. She kind of did this all day long. It just was irritating. But there was low intensity. Duration was long. So we went with duration, trying to reduce the duration of really screaming. So we collect the data, baseline data, with one of these types of data collection devices. Do the intervention, then collect it exactly the same way to see if we have change. See, again, this is just like doing a research project, is it not? You're seeing, did that work? I have a theory, I want to see if it works. So that's important. So data collection. Then, now let's look at change of behavior, because this is really important. We have antecedents, we have it's ABC. So this is another formula. It's the ABC. We have So you have the A is the antecedent. B is the behavior. And the C is the consequence. So let me ask you a question about these words, what they mean. We'll go backwards. We'll look at consequence first. When we think of a consequence, and we hear the word consequence, do we go to the negative meaning of that word? Well, you have to suffer the consequences, right? We tend to use it as a negative term. But in behavior, a consequence is just something that happens after a behavior that will cause that behavior to occur in the future. So is that reinforcement or punishment? Consequence. Remember we talked about reinforcement and punishment? And if a consequence causes that behavior to most likely occur in the future, is it a reinforcement or a punishment? Reinforcement, right. So it could be a negative reinforcement or a positive reinforcement, but it causes the behavior to increase over time. So that's the consequence. Then behavior, and we need to know what it is, and it comes immediately, the consequence is delivered immediately after the behavior. Then you have antecedent. You have two different types of antecedents. And these are things that happens before. And we have what's called the setting antecedent, and then we have the triggering antecedent. So let's think about setting antecedent is things that have happened like on the bus before the child gets to school, or happens at the night before with the parents. It set the child up to have a problem. It's like cocking a gun. To shoot a revolver, you have to cock the hammer back, and then that's the setting. And then somebody has to pull the trigger, and that's a triggering antecedent. That causes the behavior to occur. So we have setting antecedents that happen prior to the behavior, and it could be days or hours or weeks. And then you have triggering antecedents that happen right before the behavior occurs. Okay? Let me give you an example, and I'll give you a behavioral change. Johnny cannot read very well out loud, and he's very embarrassed about reading out loud. His teacher is not there this week, and you have a substitute. The substitute doesn't know Johnny doesn't like to read out loud. He doesn't read out loud very well. The substitute teacher is having everybody read out loud at their tables. And it gets to Johnny's turn, and he's been sitting there watching everybody else read and getting more and more anxious, right? Then it gets to his turn, and he says to the teacher, forget about this. I'm not going to do this. In another language that's more succinct. And throws his book at the teacher and runs out of the room. Where the substitute teacher sends him to the office where he gets no attention and he just sits down there. So that's escape motivated behavior. He was escaping, and then he was positively reinforced by being sent to the office because he escaped behavior and is positively reinforced. Next time he's to read out loud, is he going to do the same thing? You bet. So see how he was set up, then there was the trigger, then there was the behavior, then there was the consequence. That's the chains. So let's walk through some of these pieces. We'll go to my little. Okay, so an antecedent, we're going to be talking triggering antecedents because you as a teacher have very little control over setting antecedents a lot of times, but you do have a lot of control over triggering antecedents. So that's important to remember. So these are the type of things that could be triggering antecedents. And then you see the behavior of what it could be. These are some more, like asking them to do independent work they might play at their desk to avoid doing the work. Transitions, that's a big one. Unstructured situations, that could be a big one. Must physical altercations occur in unstructured times. So if you have a kid that tends to be a little aggressive, structure their day very thoroughly, and they'll be less aggressive. It's very interesting. So those are the triggering, those are some things. We just look at try to find what triggers the behavior. Then we have consequences. We'll jump to C. The consequences are something that gives after the behavior that caused the behavior to occur in the future. And it could be as simple as a teacher giving a high five, or it could be everybody laughing. Say a student likes to crack jokes in class and gets everybody to laugh. That's the consequences appears laughing in the class. And the teacher saying, Billy, stop that, kind of offhanded, right? That's a consequence. And it actually is a positive reinforcement, getting attention. So it could be as simple as these, or it could be really complex, but it's the consequence, the thing that occurs right after the behavior that causes the behavior to continue in time. So functions of behavior, there are two functions of behavior, is to get and escape. I'm sorry, this is kind of hard to read. Like if we're in a rocking chair, the reason we love rocking chairs is because it makes us feel good inside. That's an internal thing. External get is cursing or telling an off-color joke to get attention from others. That could be external. Escape or avoid, walking out of a class to avoid embarrassment, or hitting the teacher to escape the task. That could be escape. So we look and see what's the behavior doing? Is it getting them something, or they escaping from something? It's a lot of the time it's convoluted, but you'll see one thing is predominantly over another. It could be escape, it could be mostly escape, some get, those kind of things. But we need to know the function of the behavior, because when we set up an intervention, it has to be the same function. Okay? And here's just a list of some typical functions of most behaviors. Look at this list and see if that makes sense to you guys. Make sense? How that all fits, those functions? So then we look at this is what a chain of behavior looks like. Antecedents, triggering antecedent, student given independent work in a subject that's difficult. The behavior is throws paper and yells, consequence sent to the office and given no attention. So what is the function of this behavior? Escape or obtain? Who says it's escape? Escape? Who says it's to get? It's to escape. See how that you can see the change of behavior there? Here's another one. You guys read this and then tell me what you think the function of the behavior is. Who wants to be our venture out and tell us what they think the function of the behavior is? All right, is it to get something or to escape something? Which is it? Get. You see how you see this chain, how it works? So functions, you need to kind of figure out, talk to people, observe the student in the environments where they're most likely to occur, talk to the student, kind of figure that all out. But most often, it's pretty easy to tell what the functions of the behavior are. Then we need to teach an appropriate replacement behavior. How we do that is we'll ignore the problem behavior and reinforce the replacement behavior. It's going to take a longer time. And so let's say that you have Johnny that's blurting out answers in class. You want him to raise his hand. So what you do is you teach him to practice raising his hand before speaking. And then you get into a real situation and he says, hey, that's the answer. Then he says, oh, I can raise my hand. They say, good raising your hand. And then later, after you do that for a while, he raises his hand and blurts it out at the same time. But you say, good raising your hand. And then eventually it gets to the point where he raises his hand and he waits to get, say, Johnny or Billy or whatever his name is. And you say, good raising your hand and waiting for me to call him. That, and then eventually over time it changes that behavior to what you want it to be. Then we use reinforcers. Use social reinforcers as much as possible. Attaboys, good job, but you really need to know that you need to name the behavior when you're reinforcing. You don't just say good job. You say, good job doing blah, blah, blah. Good job raising your hand. Good job waiting in line with it, your hands in your pockets. Good job keeping your mouth with a bubble in it, whatever it is, you know. So you do those. You name the behavior. Things about reinforcement needs to be immediately after the behavior. It can't be an hour later to reinforce them because they'll forget why they're being reinforced. And then you're reinforcing some other behavior that you don't know what you're reinforcing. But give it to them with a lot of enthusiasm, eye contact, describe the behavior, and then for a lot of variety. We don't like eating the same thing over and over. We don't eat the same meal every night. So it's the same thing. If it's a skills deficit, we need to teach the skill and practice the skill and reinforce the skill. Here's the components of a good behavior plan that anybody can implement. It needs to increase the behavior that you're wanting to see, the replacement behavior. You might need to change the antecedents. You might need to think about what consequences are being given and manages the inappropriate behavior. So that's what you look for in a good plan. And it's simple. You as teachers in the general ed classroom can do this easily. You don't have to have a behavior specialist to do it. So it's really important. Okay. So let's look at a chain of behavior, and we're going to modify the assignment. See, the top line is the chain of behavior. The bottom is that we've modified the antecedent. No longer is it independent work, it's group work. And he's wanting attention. If you give him a group work, he's getting attention during the process, and he completes the assignment. This is very simplified, but that's kind of what we look at, okay? Chain of behavior. Now then, maybe it's the consequences. Where instead of, we teach everybody to ignore bullying, and we give attention to only on-task behavior, we're extinguishing the inappropriate behaviors, increasing the positive behaviors. See how that is done? Very likely, you'll be given a chain of behaviors in the test, and you'll need to identify how you would change the antecedent, how you would change the consequence, or would you change the behavior. Okay? This one's changing the behavior, so teaching the child to raise their hand, and it gets the same function. And these are just some things that you can look at your leisure on different functions and strategies that you can use for each of those. Giving access to desired activities. If that was a function, then they have to do certain behaviors to get that. Escape. There's some strategies you can use on that. Get attention from peers. There's some things that you can do for that. Get sensory stimulation. A lot of kids are sensory seeking kind of kids, so you need to do some things that work on that. And then develop action plan, because always you're going to need to make changes. What can go wrong will go wrong. Always happens. Murphy's Law. Then collect data to see if you got it done, and if you need to, make alterations. Okay. So as we look at this, that in summary, all behavior is learned. All behavior serves a function. We need to remember that the environment can impact the behavior, that if it's a skills deficit, it can impact the behavior. We need to use a team approach and develop relationships with our kids. Any questions or thoughts? All right, so on Thursday, I will kind of do a summary overview and give you some intervention strategies for the different disability categories that we talked about during this module. All right? Any questions from the online group? You can unmute your microphone and ask questions if you need. We good? All right, so I will see you guys that are virtually face-to-face on Thursday. See you guys online on Thursday. You have a great day.